The resin process begins by stripping the bark from the pines with the garancha in the month of March. The stripping or tearing off of the bark is done once a year to each tree by notches that start from the base. The fifth notching, that is, the one of the fifth year, is the highest of each face, and the 3 foot is needed to be able to work it. Once the bark, or ronya, has been removed, the resin maker nails the veneer with the metal cutter and places the pot. From this moment on, the pine slowly begins to drip the sap, or resin, that will be deposited in the ceramic pots. But it is precisely from now on when begins the hard work of the resin makers. From the first days of April, each resin maker dedicates daily to hoe each one of the 3,500 or 4,000 pines that has his bush or lot that has been awarded to him by lottery. Hoeing consists of skillfully pulling out strips of wood or sawdust that leave open in the pine tree new outlets of wax. This process is done every 4 or 5 days. On the sides of the cut is where the pine tree casts the most resin. In order to facilitate the conduction of the drops of resin in some cuts, the resin makers place some small sawdust or chips inclined towards the pot. That's it. As until 4 clears have not been made to each pine tree, the resin maker will not collect the sap from the pots. When the pots are full, he passes the resin to other containers that he places underneath. Appropriate width of the cut for the resin process goes from 12.5 centimeters at the base to 11 centimeters in the 5th year notching. This technique of work that consists of clearing the pines with the adze extracting small chips or sawdust is called hugis. When working the high notches, the adze is used with the long handle and it is called pulling work. On the contrary, in the low ones the short handle is used and it is called restrigilis. Another system of resin extraction is the one called bark picking, because only the first layer is removed without extracting the wood. In order to provoke the exit of the sap, the resin maker applies in the cut a few drops of sulfuric acid diluted with water. Other resin workers use the so-called paste, which is the same acid lowered, but mixed with plaster so that it does not splash on the skin. This system is the most practical and allows the resin workers who use it to work in the same hours a greater number of pines than if they used the hugis system. The work of clearing lasts until the month of October, and from All Saints' Day onwards, the raking begins. This tool is called redera, which is used to do what we're going to do now. It is only used for this. This is removed at the end of the season to wrap it with the sap so that it can be distilled better, because it would distill very badly by itself. It is scraped like this without removing the wood, because then the manufacturers will give you a discount. Just make sure to remove the sap. It is a shame to leave it in the pines because it is worth money. And since the work has been done in the summer, it is removed like this, little by little, and it will be worth some money. That's it. Now we're going to another pine tree. After the month of April, when each pine tree has already had 4 clearings, that is to say, about 20 days have passed, you can collect the sap. To remove the resin from the pots and pour it into the buckets, a knife is used. The sap collected in the buckets is transported to certain points where the buyer has deposited the buckets. When they are completely full, the manufacturer will come to remove them. If the resin maker sweats, he makes money, as the saying goes, because the hotter it is, the more sap it gives off. On average, each pine tree yields in a 9-month season about 4 kilos of resin. Therefore, a man who works 5,000 pine trees can obtain around 20,000 kilos of sap. In the metal buckets, hermetically sealed, the sap has been transported to Urbano Criado's factory. In the past, it was stored in 200-kilogram wooden barrels, which preserved the sap much cleaner. Each of the buckets is numbered, and all have the same tare. This allows the manufacturer to control the kilo of sap that he has collected, each resin maker, and its quality, to make the corresponding liquidation. As it arrives from the mountain, with all the impurities of the waste, needles, sand, and water from some storms, the sap is collected in a tank called pila, which serves as a warehouse until its transformation. To check the amount of water in the resin, a wood paddle is introduced into the bucket. In view of the bubbles that remain adhered to the resin, the manufacturer can calculate approximately the amount of water in the bucket. The kilos of water contained will be deducted from the resin maker's corresponding liquidation. Due to the pasty nature of the sap, to remove the entire contents of the bucket, hot jet streams must be applied. When it is well diluted, the sap detaches itself from the walls of the container. By its own weight, the sap enters in the preparatory cauldron, where it is diluted, by heating it to a certain temperature depending on its quality. In a filter that it has in its base, the greater impurities will remain. The production of the steam necessary for the whole process of resin distillation is done in the boiler room. Pine branches are used as fuel and other pine forest waste. Taking advantage of the pressure of the steam, the turpentine, which is the name of the clean sap, rises from the preparatory cauldron to some decanters. In them, all the liquid impurities are separated and the few solids that may have risen. In the filter of the preparatory cauldron have remained almost all of the solid impurities that have arrived inside the resin buckets. As if that were not enough, before going up to the decanters, the turpentine has passed through an autoclave, where it has left the small remains of solid impurities that have been passed from the preparatory cauldron. After 12 hours in the decanters, Urbano fills the still with turpentine. In the still, turpentine is subjected to a certain temperature to carry out the distillation process. After boiling inside the alembic, the vapor of turpentine essence with the water vapor comes out through the cap in a tube. The vapors travel through a long tube in the form of a coil inside a water condenser. In this long tube run, introduced in cold water, the vapor of the turpentine essence, or white spirit, and the water vapor condense into a liquid state. The mixture of water and turpentine falls into the Florentine. There, because of its lower density, the turpentine separates from the water. Once all white spirit has been drained out of the turpentine, the rosin remains as the second main product. Once leaving the still, the rosin, hot and liquid, passes through a very fine filter that retains any remaining impurities left. In a trolley, the rosin, or Greek fish, is taken out of the distillation center to fill the sacks with it. This process must be very fast, since, at the same time that it's cooling, the rosin is solidifying. The rosin is quickly poured into sacks already prepared for a capacity of 50 kilos, which are the ones that will be supplied in the market. The most widespread use of rosin is mainly for the production of glues, varnishes, paper, waxes, but above all, for the manufacture of chewing gum. According to the data of Urbano Criado, the manufacturer of Zarzuela del Pinar, from each kilo of sap or resin as it arrives from the mountain, it is obtained 700 grams of rosin and 200 grams of turpentine. That means there is only a loss of 10%. In Zarzuela del Pinar, the sap or resin is part of its history. There, almost all the neighbors until a few years ago have had some connection with the pine forest and have known all these little secrets of its use. Today, only about 20 men continue to collect this internal sweat that the Pinus pinister offers them as livelihood.